Good evening and welcome to Quorum. I'm Ron Brown. The legislature is on break this week, but their work is far from done. They agreed last week to extend the 2010 regular session by 3 weeks and to suspend their work until next month. They return April 20th. And by then, they should have news on a couple of fronts. They should know, for one thing, lawmakers hope to learn whether the U.S. Congress will extend the current federal match for Medicaid funding. If Congress extends it, then the State House and Senate will have an additional $187 million to work with. And they will need that money, too, as they work to appropriate $5.5 billion for the 2011 budget. Legislators also hope to get fresh reports on state revenue. The latest report for the month of March shows Mississippi finally broke a 19-month stretch of below-estimate revenue. State tax collections were up $1.2 million in March. That's just barely beating the estimate, but it did beat the estimate. 1 month doesn't mark a trend, though. We will hear directly from the lawmakers tonight about the state's budget prospects. First, we spoke in depth with Governor Haley Barbour Tuesday. He discussed his concerns about state revenue, the budget process, and the timing of the legislature's mid-session break.
I think the legislature got through with everything there was to get through. I'm glad they stayed a couple of extra days and got the bond bill done, got the House passed Department of Employment Security reauthorization, very important legislation. But there's no use for them to stick around here for several weeks waiting to see if the federal government does something. Not only does that cost the taxpayers money, I have learned that when the legislature's here and they don't have anything to do, the atmosphere just gets kind of poisonous. They get bored, they get tired, they get mad. So I think it was the right thing to do. It was done, and it was done, I think, at the right time. I had felt like the Senate, which said by a 7-0 vote in the Budget Committee that they wanted to stick to the 98% rule, that we would only appropriate 98% of the general fund. Well, if you can make that stick, that's obviously the thing to do. The alternative, and the Senate now apparently believes that they cannot make that stick in the Senate, means that the governor has to be quicker on making cuts if revenue falls short. The governor not only has the authority, but has the requirement if revenue comes in below the estimate, and I believe it will. Again, it's come in below the estimate for the last 2 years, and as you know, this year I've had to cut about $500 million because of revenue shortfall. So I believe the fact that you should keep from spending 2% because that 2% might not come in is good policy. However, some in the legislature are taking the position, oh, we're going to only spend 98% so we can add to the rainy day fund. Well, of course, that's not the purpose at all. If we had certainty that the money was going to come in, then we wouldn't need to add to the rainy day fund because, you know, we'd know that we're not going to go have another revenue shortfall. Well, I think the legislature has been reluctant to look at the difficult financial situation from a long-term perspective. There are a lot of people over there that just want to spend as much money right now, try not to change anything. And the fact is, this year we've spent $115 million out of the rainy day fund when it was our intention and agreement to only spend $95. We've spent $58 million out of the health care trust fund, and I think it's reasonable for us to say that the health care trust fund should be treated like the rainy day fund, that it is never going to be what it was meant to be initially, and that is a separate fund that would sit there and we'd only spend the principal and interest. That idea died a long time ago. There have been efforts in the legislature to spend the hurricane disaster reserve. The problem with that is we owe that money to the federal government. It's already spent. Just like $115 million of the rainy day fund is already spent. $58 million of the health care trust fund is already spent. There was an effort to say, well, there's $87 million of discretionary stimulus money that was given the governor. Most of that money is already spent. A lot of people don't realize we don't have a whole lot of money here, and I think that the rainy day fund and the health care trust fund both need to last 4 years, and the 2011 reconciliation bill upon which appropriations will be based takes that into account. We'll spend $80 million out of the rainy day fund next year is our agreement, and $54 million out of the healthcare trust fund. And in each case, that's about 1/3 of what's left in there. So we could spend it a third at each one. And that's where we ought to be.
Well, we will hear more from Governor Barbour in the hour ahead, but first, our panel for tonight's live discussion. Representative Robert Johnson III is with us. The Natchez Democrat is vice chairman of the House Medicaid Committee and a member of the Legislative Black Caucus. Republican Greg Snowden of Meridian joins us. Representative Snowden holds key memberships on the House Public Health, Judiciary A, and several other committees. Gray Tollison is here from the Senate. The Democrat from Oxford chairs the Senate's Judiciary B committee, and he's the vice chairman for education. And Senator Lee Yancey is here. The Brandon Republican is vice chairman for highways and transportation, and he works on the education, insurance, and several other Senate committees. Gentlemen, welcome to Quorum, and we also invite you to join the conversation. Our toll-free phone line is open. Dial 1-877-405-5247 with your questions for our legislative panel. The number again, 1-877-405-5247. You can also email your questions to quorum@mpbonline.org, and you can join the discussion on Twitter. Lots of choices. I want to start by asking the four lawmakers if Governor Barbour is right. Is the legislature not doing enough to plan for long-term use of the rainy day reserve? Who wants to take first crack at this?
I'll go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Because I do have a difference of opinion with the governor. I mean,
okay.
I do understand his position. But as has been already said, we have $200 million in the rainy day fund, about $200 million in the healthcare trust fund. And he does still have some federal stimulus money available, and there is the Katrina money. And the feds have not told us to pay it back, and it may be that they won't tell us to pay it back. So if you take all that money and add it together, that's $600 million. Mm-hmm. But yet we're going to furlough Department of Human Services workers this Friday. Mm-hmm. So that means the attorneys and DHS are not working to collect child support payments. The social workers are not out there investigating cases of child abuse. So I think we should be using this reserve money, that is the taxpayers' money, to make sure there is not a disruption of services. Mm-hmm. I just have a difference of opinion with the governor as to how much of that money should be used.
What do you base your opinion on, that the federal government may not be asking us to send it back?
I don't know that for sure, but certainly they haven't told us yet. But more importantly, we have $200 million in rainy day money. Mm-hmm. It is a rainy day. If you make these cuts, if you furlough these folks, it's going to be a disruption in our government services. Certainly there are some things that we should do, but you're going to end up in the long term costing the state and the taxpayers more money by shutting down these services instead of using the money that we have and allow these services to continue. And the economy is going to pick up. I'm optimistic. I think by this, second half of this year, our economy in Mississippi will pick up. I mean, we certainly had some good news, and yeah, 1 month doesn't make a trend, right, but it's certainly going in the right direction.
Okay, Senator Yancey, do you agree with your colleague on this?
I respectfully disagree with Senator Tollison, and we can say we hope the economy is going to get better, we hope that it's going to turn around, we hope that more money is going to come in, but until it does, it makes no sense to appropriate everything we have, makes no sense to spend more of our reserves than we need to. We need to be very, very frugal with the savings that we have with the healthcare trust fund, with the rainy day fund, and to make sure they do last us through this crisis. We're trying to make them last 3 more years. The crisis may last longer than 3 years, and then we're going to be in a difficult situation. We could give everybody everything they want this year, but next year we'd have nothing to give them. And so I think that we're doing the right thing by trying to stretch out our reserves and make them last as long as possible.
Okay, let's go around the table. Representative Johnson, how do you feel about the rainy day fund and its use?
Well, I like Senator Tollison. I understand the governor's position, but I want to say something. There was nobody who was involved in the budget process in the leadership position in the House that ever suggested that we use all of the rainy day fund, all of the healthcare trust fund. If you look at the statute as to the rainy day fund, you asked him, Senator Tollison, what did he base his opinion on? The statute says that the rainy day fund should be used in the case of budget shortfalls. That's what it's there for. And we are in a budget shortfall. But there was never a recommendation from the House or any Democrat Democratic leadership that I know of that said, let's use it all. But you have to balance that with not putting people out of work, not taking services that are essential away from people, and that's what we've done. And to suggest that it was done by force or pushing, it was done by compromise. There was always a question of how much or how long, but never any question about whether or not we should take part of it, not all of it.
What is the answer to that? How much? How much were you prepared to spend?
Well, we initially thought that we would do enough to plan for 2 years. The governor wanted 4 years, so we ended up with 3 years. But I think that it's prudent, and I think if you look at any economical expert, what they'll tell you is that we'll probably be in this recession throughout the year and probably another year. If that's the case, we need to plan accordingly, and that's what we've done. But I, like Senator Tollison, the numbers I've seen on the gross national product and other numbers around the country indicate that we are on a upswing, a slow, albeit upswing, but on an upswing. And I think we're on our way back, but we have to take our time and plan that way.
Okay, and Representative Snowden?
Well, I think that the real issue is, if we could see into the future and know where we're going to recover and when we're going to recover. Historically, state revenues have lagged behind the general recovery for a year or two. You look back at the early 80s, the recession in the early 80s, I think it was 86 or so, several years after the recession had ended, before Mississippi's unemployment rate got below the double digits. We just don't know what the future holds. We do know that the budget we're putting together this spring for the coming year, that it has over $400 million, close to $500 million in federal stimulus dollars that will not be available to us next year. We know what kind of rough shape we were in this year with the budget. We estimated a revenue figure last June, and in good faith put together a budget we thought was a prudent budget, and lo and behold, over the course of the year, we're $500 million short. We're in some dire situations here, and I think, in all honesty, and I'd like to be as optimistic as my colleagues, but to say that we're going to be able to put together a budget within the next couple of years that does not disrupt state services, I don't know that that's possible. I don't think that we can continue to fund government at the level we're funding it without some sort of structural and fundamental change, and I'm not sure what that is.
Well, that's the question. I mean, we keep talking about the budget in one vacuum, and that is on budget cuts. But we have an antiquated tax structure that we hadn't done anything about working on. You say you want to put people out of work and cut state services and furlough people, when our tax structure, for the most part, is based on sales tax. I mean, people go to the grocery store, if they don't spend money, which they won't have if they're not working, then we're going to continue to have declining revenues. But we have a tax structure that we need to look at and create a better balance on how we collect taxes and who we're collecting them from. And there's a lot of things to look at out there. We had a study committee that had some recommendations. We have not incorporated any of those recommendations into what we do and how we get it done. Mm-hmm. And until we look, as I'm glad Representative Snowden said, until we look at the entire picture, we're going to find ourselves just like we were in 1986, and we shouldn't be saying that in 2010.
So you're advocating higher property taxes?
Oh, I don't know which tax it is.
That's what's going to happen.
Right.
Is why cutting education is going to result in higher property taxes. So people are fooling themselves in the legislature to think, oh, we're not going to raise taxes. By cutting education and what has been done, they're going to go back home, and the supervisors and the Board of Aldermen are going to approve the school board's request for more money, and it comes in property taxes. So there will be an increase in property taxes as a result of the failure of the legislature not funding education as they should. As we voted on in 2002, overrode Governor Fordyce on the Mississippi Adequate Education Program. So yes, there's going to be property taxes raised, and it's because the legislature failed to provide the money for education.
But we got other places we can look at, but we hadn't done that. But he's right. That's what's going to happen.
But here's another thing about the budget. There's some savings. We can have more savings in Medicaid. I met with a gentleman today about some savings. We need to be smarter in the way we provide Medicaid coverage, and we can provide the same coverage and care to people at a less of a cost. I think there's a lot of things in Medicare, and that's the biggest part of our budget. Mm-hmm. I think we are providing some cuts in education with the teachers. There's going to be a 3-day time period where they won't work, and it's non-instructional days, so it won't affect the instruction to the children. They'll get paid half-time. So there will be some reductions there. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's not going to be a disruption. You can cut places, but at the same time, the tax structure. The governor had the recommendations. For example, DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, monitors our waters and air. You know how much it costs to get a permit for that from the state? $0. For the House in the past have passed that. I don't know how much the fee was, but that would sustain the Department of Environmental Quality.
Would
That's
generate
money.
millions of dollars.
It generated millions of
For a
dollars
small fee.
that we pull out of the general fund that could be used for education, could be used for DHS. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that.
We're looking at a budget that is projected to be $1.3 billion. This is for fiscal year 2012, next year's budget. $1.3 billion less available to us than we thought we had when we began 2010. $1.3 billion. You can't raise it. If we wanted to all raise taxes, you can't raise enough taxes to come close to approaching that. We've got to structure the way we're spending, and we've got to, I mean, you talk about proposals. There are a lot of ugly proposals put out there last October. None of them anybody liked. I didn't like much any of them. Consolidating K through 12 schools, merging universities and colleges, restructuring agencies, cutting down the numbers. I'm not saying any of these things particularly would be something that perhaps should be done.
And you can't run state government if you cut $1.83 billion out of it either. You can't cut enough to get it done.
You can't run the government we have now. That's exactly right.
Well,
and you can't raise enough money to fund the government we have now through new taxes.
There can be a balance of both. That's what we did. But we're not looking at both. We're just looking at one way.
But you can't raise that kind of taxes on people.
Nobody suggested that. Nobody suggested that. We said we look at the entire picture. The only thing you want to talk about are cuts.
No, we're in the middle of a recession. You don't need to tax people more.
I don't think you ought to. I think you need to look at how you do it, though.
Okay. Senator Yancey, let me ask you if you think it was a good idea for the legislature to take a 3-week break right here, right now, and I was wondering if anybody thinks that it was not beneficial.
I think it was a great idea to take a break. We've got $187 million that is potentially going to be available to us, and we need to know whether or not it is available before we can move forward with our budget process. We needed a chance to see what our first quarter budget numbers were going to be. We did have a nice surprise for March and had a little bit of a upswing, but like you said before, 1 month does not a trend make, but it is a positive sign.
After 18 months, I think there were a lot of people celebrating still.
And so it gives us 3 weeks from now will give us a little better idea of what we have to work with, we hope. And maybe we can make a better decision as to how we're going to appropriate those funds.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have a caller on the line, Jason from Meridian, who has a question for our panel. Go right ahead with your question, Jason.
I was wondering, every time I turn around and see a four-wheeler on the county road, what if you made them pay a $25 tag to be, that way the ATV would be registered, and you would get $25 for every ATV that's in the state of Mississippi?
Okay, so he's talking about raising tax?
Raising revenue through the ATVs.
Okay, this is a good idea.
It's a proposal, but let me say this about ATVs. I'm on the Judiciary B, and we deal with traffic safety and, I guess, safety of ATVs. And the Senate passed a bill this year. We have one of the highest fatality rates in the nation of people operating ATV, especially young people. And we passed a bill, and it's just a start. It's not a whole lot, but it would require persons to either have a driver's license or have a certification course provided by the Extension Service before they operate one. And additionally, it would mandate that a person under the age of 16 that was on a public property would have to wear a helmet. But we certainly need to do something. I enjoy riding ATVs. Everybody does, and especially with young people, we need to do something to address this. And I hope the legislature at least starts down that path of providing more safety regulations for people who operate ATVs.
Uh-huh. Are there any other, we're talking about raising money through other means other than taxes. Are there any other pet projects or pet ways to raise money that's going to offset some of this budget shortfall?
Nothing that comes to mind at this time.
How about creating jobs? Bringing in more employers and providing good paying, high paying jobs for an educated workforce. What the governor's been able to accomplish with Toyota and with other things is what our state needs. We need more of it. Mm-hmm. And the more we expand our taxpayer base, the broader we're going to be able to help fund our government.
Okay.
And I agree with them 100%. And the way we support that is through education. That's our number one resource is our children in this school, this state.
And that's why we dedicate 62% of our general fund to it.
Well, and the truth of the matter is we're providing less money this year than we were last year, I believe. And if we fully fund MAEP, that's going in the right direction. And yes, we need to work on those poorly performing schools. We need to go after them and do some things. And I want to be creative about, because I don't, the leave no child behind is important, and it's important in Mississippi.
I want to say something about that, though, about creating jobs. Now, I'm all for it, and I worked real hard to try to get. We have a diesel plant that's supposed to be coming to Natchez in our area. But the difference, for instance, in the Natchez area is that there were not these huge tax breaks that we gave to the people coming. But everybody has to do it. But I don't think the public knows that when we do bonding for large corporations, they come here. They don't. We're relying on them creating jobs, and the income we receive, the state receives from that, they receive from the people who are working there, not from the company themselves. So we just, when people see Nissan and Toyota, they think all of a sudden things are going to turn around and why the state revenue's down. Well, part of that is because, all of the income is individual income tax and sales tax, and that we got about $4 billion in state tax breaks that we give that we don't know who we give. Some people don't know who we're giving them to. So we got a lot of things we can look at out there, and I think the governor's done a great job creating jobs. But people need to know that bringing a Toyota plant in here doesn't automatically mean that you're going to have a $400 million boost in revenue to the state. It just doesn't mean that.
Okay, we have a phone call on education with a question on education. Jimmy from Hazelhurst, go right ahead with your call.
Yes, I've noticed, everybody keeps kind of fumbling with the question of education. And, it's not an election year, so it's easy to kind of put it off, I reckon.
Okay, Jimmy, can you turn your TV set down to maybe hear us better?
Oh, I'm not in front of it. But anyway, I thought that the casinos, when they came in several years ago, were supposed to sponsor fully funded education. The revenue from that. Mm-hmm. And you don't hear anything about that anymore. Where is that money being spent?
Okay, that's Jimmy's question. Where's the casino money going? Why not to education?
Most of it's going to education because that money goes into the general fund, and as Senator Yancey pointed out, about 62% of the general fund does go to education. Now, it's a matter of perspective. Representative Johnson was absolutely right. Most of our money, the taxpayer money that goes into the general fund, about 40% is derived from sales tax, another 30% from individual income tax, and I think roughly 10% from corporate income tax. So 80% of your budget of the general fund money that we spend is corporate income tax, individual income tax, and sales tax. Now, the casino revenue is significant, but I think it's less than 5%. I'm pretty sure that's true. Sure, yeah. It's a small component of the overall general fund budget. So that money is helpful to the state budget, and the lion's share of that does go to education because 2/3 of the general fund goes into education. But it was before I was in the legislature when it was adopted. I know there's a lot of scuttlebutt just in my general recollection about how good this would be for education or whatever. I don't know if that's been the case, but I don't know that anybody ever promised it would fully fund education. If they did, they weren't shooting straight with someone. I can tell
but you're not. Are you surprised to hear that someone is thinking that it has not lived up to the expectations?
No, not at all. I mean, we're all disappointed, I guess, when you have to adjust your budget in the way we're having to do that. I mean, again, $1.3 billion in the space of 2 or 3 years is what we're looking at. That's a drastic adjustment, and it raises a lot of challenges.
I think people look at the lotteries like in Tennessee and Georgia and see how that's funding people's young people's college education, and they say, why can't we do something here? Well, my thought is you're probably not going to have a lottery because you have gambling here, and really I think those states are hurting right now with those scholarships because of the economy. So it's hard to rely on that as a steady source of income.
They're hurting worse. And he probably is focused. When they sold gaming, the way they got it passed was to say that we're going to use it to fund education. That's what they told people. When we passed it, I wasn't here then, but when they passed it, they it was put into the general fund. But Greg is right. Most of it goes to education. But I mean, we're a poor state. I mean, there are no simple answers to any of these questions.
Well, education cuts are among the most sensitive matters linked to the state's budget crisis. The 2010 budget for K through 12 education has been cut about $224 million so far, or 9.5%. That and other program cuts are a direct result of those declining state revenues over the last year and a half. This month, the legislature approved a bill allowing districts to furlough teachers and non-instructional staff on a limited basis for this school year and the next. The governor appears likely to sign the bill into law.
At the end of the day, you have to look, though, at whether or not it is better to furlough some people and reduce their pay a little bit, or if it's better to bite the bullet and say next year or the following year, we're going to have fewer people that work here. You know, in a big school district, 2 or 4 or 5 furlough days is the equivalent of several jobs. And if you know your revenue is coming back, then it makes sense to have a short-term interim solution like furloughs. If your revenue's not coming back, then you need to look at this like a business and say, how are we going to restructure our costs so that year in and year out we live within our means? It's not a simple question, it's not an easy question, but I think under the circumstances right now, that what the legislature allowed school districts to do about furloughs on non-instructional days is prudent.
Okay, Senator Yancey, what are your opinions on the teacher furlough measure? Were the furloughs inevitable?
I think the furloughs will be helpful, and like the governor said, it's a temporary solution if it's a short-term solution. I come from a public education background. My mother's retired public school teacher. Hi, Mom. And you know, she gave her life to teaching first grade. My sister and I were educated in public schools. My wife was. My children go to public school. You know, I've got skin in the game. I care deeply about it. But you know, what concerns me is making sure that we weather the storm, making sure that we fund education as good as we can, but making sure that we can also have something to give them next year if cuts are made. Furloughs will help. I know in Rankin County, with the original bill, I believe we were talking about 5 days of furlough, and what we ended up with was 3. But when it was 5 days, it was going to save us approximately $600,000 a week, and that was very, very significant.
Okay, does anybody else have an opinion on the furlough, on whether they were inevitable and necessary considering the budget constraints this year?
I don't know that you could say they were inevitable. I mean, there were many things we could have done. You know, it hits close to home to me too. My wife's a public school teacher, and my daughter's a public school teacher. So, you know, this is kitchen table sort of talk. Mm-hmm. But the point is, as the governor made clear, a furlough is a lot better than losing your job. And I think everyone hates we're to that situation. And hopefully we'll come out of it. Hopefully it is temporary. But for the short term, the districts need the flexibility. They've got to do some terrible things with their own budgets because of the funding situation we all find ourselves in. So it's an additional tool that hopefully will, if we're talking about disruption again, will be the least disruptive of many options available.
I don't like it at all, but I understand with the non-instructional days, it was an option and a better option than what could have been done. But what's going to happen is you're going to probably have bigger class sizes, which is not good. And some programs may be eliminated. The gifted program, maybe some vocational programs, that's not good at all. Mm-hmm. And that's why I get back to the point is we need to keep our eye on the ball, and that's education. If this state is ever going to get off the bottom, education should be the priority, even in bad budget years. And I'm glad that the House sent us a funding bill that restored some cuts to education this year, and we were able to get, after we pushed, we were able to get the governor to agree to $82 million, and a large part of that was for education. And I hope when we go back in April 20th, we do the same thing, because we voted, I think 31 senators voted to provide more funding for education, and a majority of the House did too.
But Senator Tollison, wouldn't you agree that if education is our largest line item, that it would be our highest priority?
Well, not when we're cutting it. No,
we're cutting everything.
$212 million.
How do you not cut something that takes up 62% of the general fund? How do you cut everybody else to make up for that?
62% includes IHL, 8 universities and colleges, and 15 community colleges.
Is that not important?
It is important, but I'm saying it should be as important as it was 2 years ago and last year. And I'm glad that we don't provide.
But we don't have the resources that we did 2 years ago.
We have $600 million in a savings account that we can spend to make sure we don't have larger classroom sizes.
That we are trying to give to them over the next 3 years.
I don't want to eliminate gifting programs. I don't want to eliminate vocational programs. I don't want to have larger classroom sizes. We can do it. There's $200 million just in the rainy day fund, which will be replenished. Part of that.
I'd love to have my cake and eat it too.
The good news is that the House and Senate, as a precondition really to to agreeing to extend the session. The House and Senate are in agreement on an overall budget figure, about $5.5 billion. These kind of discussions about how much reserve funds we should spend or whatever really have already been determined. We have, by resolution, decided what our number is going to be, other than the 187 million,
right.
which of course we're anticipating that will come in. But the resolution specifically says if we don't have the 187 when we do come back, we're going to adopt a budget anyway and deal with the 187 when it does come in. So my point is simply this: we're in agreement over the amount of money to spend with the 187, to kind of to the side that will become a part if we have it. We know how big the pie is, so the decisions that are going to be left for us when we come back in April are, who gets how much of the pie. That's always a difficult decision to make, many different difficult decisions, but it's at least a decision you can make once you agree on how much money you're spending. And part of the appropriate, we always play games during the appropriation process, in my opinion. One house will pass, will put more money in to a certain line item than the other house, and it really never means much when you're not playing with the same number, because you're not at the same table. Now, at least when we come back in April, we'll know what number we're dealing with, and it really will be a true reflection of priorities, or determining how much to spend out of whatever we've already determined we have.
On the topic of education, let's go to an email question from Walter Wallace in Cleveland, who wants to know, why can't the legislators pass a meaningful school charter law modeled after states that have been successful with their charter schools?
Because I don't know any states that have been successful with charter schools. There have been some districts that have had some successful charter schools, but a recent study that's well documented, only 17% of the charter schools show an improvement in their test scores. 37% show that they do worse than the public schools, and 46% don't show any difference. Charter schools is not a panacea to all your educational problems, and I certainly don't think that it is what we need in Mississippi. It may be that you can structure one that works in a certain area, and we passed a bill to allow that to happen in certain schools, in at least 12 different school districts. But it is not the answer to the end all. And when you look at what goes into a charter school, what makes it work? More money, better teachers, better programs. We need to do that in these failing districts that we got right now. That's all they need. And in every one of these districts, it comes down to money. I was listening to everybody talk around the table. It's interesting how money affects policy. You understand? We got larger classrooms because we don't have any money. We got failing school districts because they're in poor areas. Money in this state and any other state is what affects policy. And until we recognize that, Senator Yancey talked about creating jobs. He's exactly right. Senator Tollison talks about, how do you create those jobs? Every major industry that you talk to that wants to come here or interested in coming here, the first thing they look at is your school district. But what kind of school system do you have?
We need educational choice in Mississippi. We need parents to have an opportunity to take their child out of a failing school, and we need a real charter school bill, which we do not have this year.
What you need is to put the right money and instruction in those school districts. Every one of them is a poor school district. Every one of them lacks money. Every one of them is in a poverty-stricken area that no teacher wants to go to.
I don't know why people are so afraid of charter schools.
Well, they're afraid of them because the history in this state is that when you start a charter school, what you end up is a segregated private school.
Well, that is absolutely not our intention.
Well, I know it's not your intention, and I don't think it's your intention, but that's the history we're faced with, and that is the fear people have.
This is now, and we want charter schools to help children of every race get the best education they can possibly get.
Well, what I see kids that get a good education, they live in Oxford, they live in Clinton, they live in Harrison County, they live in Tupelo, all those areas where you have enough money to have a good school system. The school systems that are failing live in areas with double-digit unemployment, 20% of the population is in poverty. That's what I see. And until you start,
how much money would it take?
How much? I'll tell you what it would take. It would take putting infrastructure dollars in those areas. You don't have those places. Also, are places where all of the infrastructure is failing. We don't build highways in those areas. Look in the Delta in Southwest Mississippi, where you have the highest unemployment rates. We didn't build highways in those areas 4-lane. But look in Northeast Mississippi. Look on the Gulf Coast, where we spend money. Where you need it and where industry is, you see a difference. So until you start putting infrastructure money in places that are needed, instead of putting it in places where you say, well, these people can attract the industry. Well, what about areas where industry won't come because you don't have good schools, you don't have good roads, you don't have good public service? What happens to that? That's what you need to do.
You're not talking about education funding. If you look
Oh, yes, I am.
No.
Yes, I am.
No, if
you don't
look
have
at
good schools unless you have the right financial base to get it done.
But now you look at the per student expenditure. Some of the highest performing districts we have in this state spend less per student than some of the poorest performing districts.
I'm just looking at the numbers. Unemployment and poverty is high in the areas where you have failing schools.
About charter schools, it's interesting to me that unless I've been misled on this, President Obama strongly supports charter schools, and Senator Yancey's over there with the president. And
well, let me tell you what, I like the president.
Which I find interesting.
I don't agree with everything the president says.
I
disagree with most of what the president says.
I just find that interesting.
This is timely. As you know, the Delaware and Tennessee were awarded Race to the Top money. Unfortunately, we missed out on that money too, and it's a shame because I think there are certain types of charter schools that actually the public schools in Mississippi could work within them. We had a good charter school bill last year, I think, that I supported, and unfortunately, I don't know where that went. We passed some legislation. I don't know if it's a charter school or conversion school.
It should
or
help us with Race to the Top.
There's a lot of nonprofit organizations out there. One called the KIPP School that operates in West Helena. I've been over there twice. I know they want to move into the Delta. There are certain types of schools that I think would work in low-performing districts because it's not working in the low-performing districts now. And I am of the opinion, give something else a try, whatever it is, focus on it.
I believe in giving something else a try, but people keep talking about charter. The same thing you do with charter schools, we can do within our own system. The KIPP School is a school that works, but if you spent that kind of money in North Panola School District, if you spent that kind of money, I'm talking about, let's not get into per student expenditure, but if you spent the money the way they spend it in the KIPP School and you spend it at North Panola School District, it would work.
Okay, gentlemen, we have a phone call from Boonville. This is Yvonne, who has a question for our panel. Go ahead with your question, Yvonne.
Hello. I'm so glad to see that y'all are trying to listen to each other. I'd like to thank y'all for that. But my concern is for people who are like me, who have been unemployed for 2.5 years, took the WIA, went back to school to get an elementary education degree, and then y'all are telling me y'all are cutting the budget, and I'm going to graduate here in another year. My son has lost his job. His wife, his kids, 2 kids have moved into the house with us. We don't qualify for anything. We're sitting here starving most of the time. We're hurting. We need work. I've been out there looking for work, can't find work. I'm too old, it seems like, overqualified, and it's very frustrating. And then y'all are sitting around and trying to make decisions that are affecting our lives, and we're dying here. And Prentiss County is the very county that's not getting any recognition here, or our Yucca, Tishomingo County, the 2 counties right up here. We've got more than 15 to 20% of our people unemployed here. People are going to Tupelo and to Corinth, and that's where the funding seems to always keep going. What do y'all want us to be, a ghost town? What about us? Do we have to leave the state to go somewhere else? And then that's going to sit there and make the taxes not come in and your money not be there. I'm really, really frustrated, and we're
Yvonne?
very much in need of some kind of hope, and we're not seeing any out there. And when you're cutting education benefits, which is what I'm trying to strive and work towards getting, because I'm very concerned for this younger generation that is coming up. My grandkids that live in the house with me, I'm very concerned about their future as well.
Yvonne, thank you very much for the phone call. Let our panel respond to this, a very emotional plea from Boonville.
Very moving. I think there are a lot of people in Mississippi that don't have work right now, and I can assure you we're doing everything that we can to make sure we're bringing jobs with the governor and providing money. One thing specific to her I think should be brought out is I think what you're going to see is a lot of experienced teachers are going to retire in the next year or two. And actually, she will have an opportunity to get a job. And you know, all I can say is go to that WIN Job Center in that area, and keep the name and the resume, and keep those resumes at the local schools. And look, Prentiss County, I'm familiar with that. My family, my father's family's from there. they're going to benefit. When Toyota gets up and running, they're going to benefit from that, and the suppliers in that area. So yes, it's tough right now, and I can assure you, though, we're all doing everything we can we're moving in the right direction. We may not agree all the time how to get to that point, but we are moving in the right direction of trying to bring jobs to people.
Okay, a bond package worth more than $700 million is a key development in this year's legislature. That money will go toward construction at state colleges and universities, transportation work, and several other purposes. In the past, Governor Barbour sought to keep the size of those bond programs low, but he says this particular effort will help create 4,500 jobs for Mississippi workers.
What I try to do is limit the amount of bonds that we issue to the amount we pay off that year. My first 5 years as governor, first 4 years as governor, actual amount of bonds outstanding for Mississippi went down from about $3.2 billion to about $3.1 billion, and we actually paid off more than we issued. Toyota changed that, and we got up to about 3.4, which is where we are this year. Last year, we actually paid off more than we issued. This year, we're going to, when you subtract economic development, and that's what has been my policy, let's don't issue any more than we pay off except for job creation. That when you subtract that, this year we're going to pay off about $265, and we're going to issue about $310, $320, little more than I would like. But having said that, so much of this is going into economic development that I'm comfortable with it. It isn't, again, imperfect. I would have done it a little bit different, but I don't find it irresponsible or unreasonable.
Okay, gentlemen, do you agree that the state should extend those huge bond measures in order to boost job growth?
I think sometimes spreading out our debt over a 20-year period is a good way to do things. I really like the idea of whatever we pay off a previous year, not exceeding that the next year, making sure that we don't take on additional debt. Mm-hmm. I think it's good fiscal money management. And we have so many state buildings that are in disrepair that need to be addressed. We have highways and bridges that must be addressed, safety issues, economic development issues, and so I think this is a good bond bill, and I'm glad we passed it.
Okay. Reverend Fields is on the line from Picayune, and what is your question for the panel, Reverend? We had Reverend Fields. We're sorry about that, and if he can call back, we would like to hear from him. The governor's emphasized advanced manufacturing, energy production, and tourism as development priorities. Does anybody disagree with that approach?
Not at all.
Those all sound like good ideas.
Yeah, I think tourism is a great thing that we need to build upon because we have so many resources with music and all our different culture here, and I think they're doing a good job at MDA with that, and I wish we could probably double our budget in promoting tourism because across the ocean, a lot of people love coming to Mississippi. I mean, we're the home of music, of great blues music and Elvis, and we need to continue promoting country music. Jimmy Rogers.
We have Jimmy Rogers Festival in Meridian every year. You'd be amazed at the people that come from Australia and Europe. You know, they're right there in the Queen City, celebrating Jimmy Rogers. It's a neat thing.
And writing, William Faulkner from my hometown. In Tennessee, Williams, Eudora Welty. I mean, you can go on and on.
You've got to let Robert Johnson talk about it.
Richard Rice.
Yeah, far be it from me to be against anything associated with blues music or Robert Johnson or anything. But I didn't vote for the big bond bill, the $400 million part of the bond bill.
Did you really make a deal with the devil?
Not yet, anyway. But my problem with it goes back to the discussion we were having earlier, is that I disagree with where we were spending the money. Senator Yancey is right. We have buildings that are in disrepair, and we need that done. But we've done quite a bit of that in the last 10 years. And the interesting thing is that we are building new buildings where we have buildings that we could be moving some of our agencies into. I'm for having a central capital type complex. I think it's more efficient. But this bill had a bill in it to spend $20 million to move a crime lab out of Hinds County into Rankin County, and it had, and Jackson is suffering from a water and sewer problem. I don't think Senator Yancey did that, but a water and sewer problem right here in the capital city, where state government is located, and we didn't give Jackson $6 million to deal with that problem. We loaned them $6 million to deal with that problem. We got universities in this state who are in dire need of infrastructure work. We gave $7 million to Alcorn to do a gas line, but we have water sewer problems down there that are twice that much. And you're trying to attract students. We're trying to attract industry in Southwest Mississippi. You need more talented students, as many as possible, to want to go to school that way, and you want to have a place they want to come. And I just, you got Highway 61 that should be 4-lane as part of the 87 highway program. We hadn't done that yet. We take and spend $90 million on a 9-mile stretch of highway around Toyota, because even though we spent over $300 million on the Toyota plant, we spending $90 million on that highway, and we haven't done the $200 million that we need to obligate to the 87 highway program. There, in all the areas that I'm talking about, I just want to see the people who are underserved being served, and I don't see this bond bill and some of the things we're doing. We have 1,100 bridges that are in disrepair. The school buses go across every day. And the Senate decided that we didn't need to fund. We were only trying to do $134 million on those. They didn't think that we should do as many as possible. 1,100 bridges that are unsafe in the state. So even though I agree with part of what the governor says, I would like to see us try to take care of a few more people that need it worse.
Okay, we're going to go to a question here from the phone bank, and this is Jason from Richland who has a question for us. What do you have for us, Jason?
My question is: it seems as though education is a top priority or topic tonight, and I agree with Representative Tollison that if a child is gifted, he or she should be able to cash in on all the great assets of their gifted program. But it seems as though we have so many school districts throughout our state. Why can't we consolidate? I think Texas per capita has a better ratio than the state of Mississippi does, and these guys are making upwards of huge dollars, and we're falling short on education every year.
So it's a school consolidation question.
Well, my understanding is that we may have a special session to deal with that. I keep hearing that rumor, and the governor's not told me that, and I've not heard him say that. I do know there's a proposal or a study about how to deal with possible K-12 consolidation. I keep hearing rumors we may at some point during the year, if they have a solid proposal, come back and be asked to deal with that. I don't know if that's true.
Well, the commission meets on April 19th.
I'm on that commission, and so
I would be in favor of anything that put more money in the classroom and took care of our teachers, took care of our national board certified teachers. I think education is top heavy in administration, and I think that consolidating school districts is the way to go. 152 school districts in 82 counties is ridiculous, and it's terrible that it's been this way for this long. It doesn't take that many levels of administration to run a school system.
Okay, you agree with that?
Yeah, and I'm on that commission. For the last 10 years, I've introduced a bill to consolidate school districts. Mine is fashion. If you live in a county that has a population of less than 80,000, then you should look at whether or not you have too many school districts. Essentially, that's what I say. But the other thing to consider is that you're right. I do think it's top heavy, and I don't think it's just top heavy in our local school districts. I think it's top heavy on the state level as well. Sure. And so we do need to look at some of our administrative costs. But more importantly, when you start dividing in some of these districts that I talk about that are poor districts, I mean, some of them are in counties where you're dividing resources 5 times when you don't. Some school districts only have 480 students, but the superintendent still makes $120,000, $140,000 a year. And so, I'm a little bit biased. I grew up, was educated in a public consolidated school district, Adams County consolidated, Natchez Adams consolidated school district. I just, in a county that has only 33,000 people, which is where I'm from, I don't understand why you need more than one. And so I do think it's an efficient way. The only problem is that every time somebody gives an example, they talk about Bolivar County or somebody like that. The truth of the matter is that, I don't care if you got 2 great school districts. Sometimes it's still too many in one county. You don't need but one.
I have a question here that we received from Twitter. How about anybody just explaining what the SLRP, or the Supplemental Legislative Retirement Plan, is? Who wants to take a crack at this?
Want to flip for it?
I don't see anybody jumping at it. What is the Supplemental Legislative Retirement Plan?
Well, it's just that, and I'm certainly no expert at it. I've been in the legislature. This will be my 11th year. This was something that was added as a legislative benefit, I guess, back in the late 80s, early 90s. It is, in fact, a supplemental. It's not a completely separate plan, but supplemental to the regular retirement plan. And it is, in all honesty, a beneficial perk, if you will, for legislative people. Mm-hmm. That you can go back historically and look for why that was done. I really don't know. I wasn't here.
How much of a benefit? How much of a perk?
This sounds ridiculous, but I've never calculated that. I'm not considering retiring yet. Now, my constituents may have a different idea about that, but I hear it. I think the way it works is it adds some additional time over a period of time, and you end up accumulating years faster than you otherwise would. That's and of course the money that goes with it.
Well, I think you get to contribute more, and you get to the state contributes more.
That's correct.
And I don't know why this was done. I know it's very unpopular for legislators to ever raise their salaries
at a time when we're cutting budgets.
And they may have done it back then to say we're never going to be able to raise the salary from the $10,000 a year salary, plus the expenses and everything. But perhaps it was done in order to give people more of an incentive to participate in the citizen legislature, because it's very hard to earn a living and be a legislator.
But at a time like this, when budget cuts are so severe, and you're talking about you're cutting education, you're cutting everything across the board. A lot of questions like this always come up.
And we passed bills in the Senate to reduce our salaries and those kinds of things.
Okay, well, if you need proof that the legislature and the governor's office really can work together, consider this. More than 90 members of the House, the Senate, and the Barbour administration came together Tuesday evening for a 5-kilometer run through the streets of downtown Jackson. They've been working out in a 12-week training program led by personal trainer Paul Lacoste. The effort is paid for by corporate sponsors, and collectively the group has lost more than 1,300 pounds since January. Weight loss and physical fitness are critical priorities for hundreds of thousands of Mississippians. Our state leads the nation in obesity, and together we face a variety of other health problems. Gentlemen, the training challenge is clearly a positive example, as we see, but what other measures should the legislature take to promote healthy lifestyles in Mississippi?
I think one of the things we ought to do is in our schools, healthy food. And one of the things we did a couple of years ago is got carbonated beverages or soft drinks out of there. Mm-hmm. And but here we are, an agricultural state, and we haven't passed on the tradition to our children about growing a garden. And I wish we would do more about local food and supporting our farmers.
Education.
Absolutely. Instead of going down to the convenience store and thinking that's where you get your meal, it's going out and learning about growing tomatoes, and that milk comes from a cow, not from this grocery store. We need to do more of that. Our local farmers market, we passed a bill to clarify that they're exempt from sales tax. I have a great source for milk up in my area, Billy Ray Brown. He has a little dairy, and he gets the milk right there. I know where it comes from. It comes out in Lafayette County. And we need to do more to support that, support local farmers. And I think that's happening. I think there's a growing movement around the country, and I see it in Mississippi, and I know our Department of Agriculture is doing that.
Okay, we have 4 minutes remaining in the show, and with that remaining time, I'd like to ask the question of our panelists. What do you consider the highlights of the 2010 session so far? The positives. What jumps to mind first?
Well, I think what really jumps to mind, and Greg hit on it, I think that the House, the Senate, and the governor's office reached an agreement essentially on the budget. We all recognized that we had a serious budget problem. We came to an agreement and worked together to get something done that I think that is going to help us over the long term. The other thing is that I think that the employment security bill that we passed that reduced the base period that people could qualify, that's going to mean an $18 million bump from the federal government to our Unemployment Security Commission, and it's going to help over 7,000 unemployed people here in the state. I wish that we could have adopted some of the other policies that would have meant another $37 million, but that, and I applaud Representative Strada and the Labor Committee that pushed real hard to make sure that we were doing something to help people like this lady who called in, who's out of work. And so I think that was a highlight that we were able to do that, and hopefully we'll continue to talk about what we can do for those who are unemployed and need help.
Just 90 seconds left. Anybody else have a highlight of this session?
I'll make it very quick. I want to say I agree with Robert about the budget agreement. Maybe that's freshest on our minds, but it really is a huge thing for the House, the Senate, and the governor to agree on a big budget number of appropriations. That's what kept us here to last June. Last year was the failure to agree with that. And I'll have to say, as a House Republican, we complain a lot, and I think justly so, that we're cut out a lot of the budgeting process. But during this process, Chairman Stringer and the House leadership invited us to the table. Of course, we kind of forced our way in there with some strategic things, but still, we were invited there and welcomed there, and I think it helped toward a positive move toward the budget.
Okay, 1 minute left. Senator Tollison?
Yes, I think the single most important thing we did that's non-budget related is pass a pseudoephedrine bill to ban pseudoephedrine, make it prescription only. We have a meth epidemic in this state, and this is going to go a long way to reducing labs and the supply of that, and it's going to help a lot. And that will go into effect July 1st.
Okay, Senator Yancey, anything quickly?
I was disappointed last year that our bond bill did not come out for transportation and highways, and I was very, very glad that we passed that bill this year to take care of our roads and bridges. Probably the most disappointing thing of the session was that Nathan's Law did not pass, and I hope and pray that we can bring that up next year and get a good law passed. That's definitely a high priority for me.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like the full details on the legislation working its way through the state capitol this year, you can find them online. It's a long web address, so get your pen and paper ready. The address is billstatus.ls.state.ms.us. I'm going to give you that website address once again. The address for the Mississippi Legislature online is billstatus.ls.state.ms.us. Well, it's about 8 o'clock right now, so we're going to get our dots out of here. I'd like to thank our legislative panelists. We also thank you for joining in on the discussion. This edition of Quorum will be available for viewing online tomorrow at mpbonline.org. Another address for you. Quorum returns next month for continued coverage of Legislative 2010. Until then, we'll see you on MPB Think Radio and MPB Online.